guys, when you're hearing this conversation, you're hearing Jon talk about painting a photo, but one of the things that he was doing really brilliantly there, and if you're picking up on this, he was summary closing that person.
One of my favorite moves.
Well, yeah, right? I mean, how crazy is that? He's a homicide detective, and he's summary closing somebody in a box, right? And so, Jon, talk to me a little bit about how you use the summary close with your prospects.
It's funny because when I teach my class, I call it the summary close. And I referred into my class, a bunch of cops sitting in there, homicide detectives, burglary detectives, police officers. And I talk to them and I say, I learned this from sales. This is exactly where I learned this. But it's called a summary close. And for me, especially for me, understand this. That when I am in an interview room with somebody, especially a suspect, their mind is going a mile a minute. There's so much going on. So they may not remember what I told them an hour into the interview or 5 minutes into the interview, right? I might talk about how, maybe a witness saw them. Right. Or maybe 20 minutes later, I talk about we have phone records that put them in the area. Maybe 15 minutes after that, I show them DNA evidence, right? And while that's good evidence and that's great, their mind's going a mile a minute, and it may not make the impact because they were thinking of something else when I was talking to them about a specific item. Yep. So towards the end of my interview, when I know that I've introduced the majority of my evidence or, when it's time and I see it working, I like to do a summary close. I'll remind them of all the evidence. And I teach my class, it's one long run-on sentence. Talk about the strength of the case, remind them how strong it is, remind them each piece of evidence, right? And just one summary close and one long run-on sentence, so it makes an impact. And I think that's huge. And that's the summary close for me.
Oh, it is so good. Yeah. So it's funny. So summary close is kind of like the popular term. I've recently started calling it an avalanche close, right? Because it almost feels like an avalanche if you're doing it right.
Right.
And so for the salespeople out there, and honestly, even for law enforcement people out there, like, don't be afraid to remember throughout your time with that person, the things that made that person's eyes, it sounds, a little soft, but, sparkle, right?
Sure.
Like, make that person kind of smile or perk up, right? It might, for you might look at this lot and be like, dang, this is the most beautiful lot in the neighborhood, or this is the best insurance policy for you, or the best whatever. But at the end of the day, that might not be the thing that sells them. Right. So I had a really good real estate mentor one time, and he looked at me and he said, listen, I was struggling selling this house and I couldn't get anybody to buy this house. And he looked at me and he said, you know why you can't get anybody to buy that, right? I said, well, yeah, probably because the backyard sucks. It's a terrible lot. He goes, no, you can't get anybody to buy it because you wouldn't buy it. He goes, you don't believe in the product. You don't believe in the property. And maybe it isn't the best property on the books, but for somebody who's never had a home before, this is a home run. And in that moment, it hit me, how many of us as salespeople are sitting out there not moving certain products because we don't think they're a good product?
Your presentation, your visual and verbal presentation.
That's exactly
everything.
Right. From the very first point of this whole conversation was believing in what you're selling. How many of you have a property right now, have a home right now, a spec, have a policy, have something that you're selling that you don't believe in?
That's amazing.
And so what you got to do is you got to go to that property and you got to find 3 things. That's what he told me to do. He said, go to that property, find 3 things that you absolutely love about this property. Go there, write them down, and own it. Like, own those things. I had that home under contract 48 hours later. Right? Because I, in that next presentation, took the buyers there first and said, listen, let me tell you why.
Right.
This is the sleeper home of Eagle Reserve. Right? And the buyer was like, the sleeper home.
Sound advice.
Right? People were like, oh my God.
Right.
Almost like a stock tip.
That's
right? They're
amazing.
like, oh, we've got it now. Oh, this guy's giving us a deal, right? People love a deal.
Yeah.
So in today's market where you can't give a deal, make it sound like you're giving them a deal.
That's true.
Right? And so anyways, went a little off track there, but I definitely wanted to touch on it.
We're learning.